Gideon, strength in weakness, trusting God's vision over self-doubt. Life has a way of magnifying our insecurities. When faced with challenges that seem insurmountable, it's easy to dwell on our weaknesses and limitations. But here's the good news. God doesn't call the qualified, He qualifies the called. Throughout the Bible, we see a recurring theme. God using ordinary, even flawed individuals to accomplish extraordinary things. One of the most inspiring examples of this truth is the story of Gideon. Gideon's journey, found in Judges 6-8, teaches us how to trust God's vision over our self-doubt. It's a story of transformation, from fear to courage, from weakness to strength, and from doubt to faith. Let's dive deep into Gideon's life and discover how we, too, can embrace God's power in our moments of weakness. 1. The background: Israel in crisis. To understand Gideon's story, we must first grasp the context. The Israelites were in a dark time, oppressed by the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites, along with other eastern tribes, would invade Israel, destroy crops, and steal livestock. The Israelites were so fearful that many hid in caves and mountain strongholds. In their desperation, the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. And as God often does, He chose an unlikely hero to deliver them, Gideon. 2. The call: the Lord is with you. When we first meet Gideon, he's threshing wheat in a winepress, a clear sign of his fear. Normally, wheat is threshed in open spaces to allow the wind to separate the grain from the chaff. But Gideon was hiding, trying to avoid detection by the Midianites. In this moment of fear and vulnerability, the angel of the Lord appeared to him, saying, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Judges 6 verse 12. Pause for a moment. Gideon, who saw himself as the least in his family and whose tribe was the weakest in Israel, is addressed as a mighty warrior. God wasn't speaking to who Gideon was in that moment. He was speaking to who Gideon would become through his power. This is a profound lesson for all of us. God doesn't define us by our current circumstances or insecurities. He sees us through the lens of His purpose and potential. 3. Wrestling with self-doubt. Gideon's response to God's call is one of doubt and hesitation. "Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all His wonders that our ancestors told us about? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." Judges 6 verse 13. Not only does Gideon doubt himself, but he also questions God's presence and promises. Sound familiar? How often do we let our circumstances cloud our faith? How often do we focus on what we lack instead of on God's abundant power? God's response to Gideon is both simple and profound. "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" Judges 6 verse 14. This is the turning point. God doesn't ask Gideon to muster up extraordinary strength. He simply asks Gideon to take a step of faith, trusting that God's presence will make the difference. 4. Signs of reassurance. Despite God's clear call, Gideon still struggled with doubt. He asked for multiple signs to confirm that it was truly God speaking to him. The offering consumed by fire. Gideon prepared a meal and placed it on a rock, as the angel of the Lord instructed. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the offering. a clear sign of God's power and approval. Judges 6 verses 17 to 21. The fleece test. Gideon asked God to make a fleece what with dew while keeping the ground dry. God did as Gideon requested. Still uncertain, Gideon asked for the reverse the next night. Again, God graciously obliged. Judges 6 verses 36 to 40. These signs weren't for God's benefit. They were for Gideon's. God understood Gideon's frailty and met him where he was. This reveals God's patience and kindness. He doesn't scold us for our doubts. Instead, he lovingly reassures us, equipping us for the tasks he calls us to. 5. God's power and weakness. Once Gideon finally accepted his calling, God began to prepare him for battle. But here's where the story takes a surprising turn. Gideon assembled an army of 32,000 men, but God said it was too many. Through a series of reductions, God whittled the army down to just 300 men. Why? God wanted to ensure that the victory would clearly be attributed to his power, not human strength. As he explained, "You have too many men. I cannot deliver Midian into their hands, or Israel would boast against me. My own strength has saved me." Judges 7 verse 2. With just 300 men armed with trumpets, jars, and torches, Gideon's army defeated the Midianites. This victory was a testament to God's might and a reminder that our weaknesses are not obstacles to God. They are opportunities for his power to shine. 6. Lessons from Gideon's journey. 1. God sees your potential, not your limitations. When God called Gideon a mighty warrior, it wasn't wishful thinking. It was a declaration of who Gideon would become through faith. Similarly, God sees beyond our insecurities and speaks to our potential. 2. Faith requires action, even in fear. Gideon didn't wait until he felt brave to act. He obeyed God despite his fear. Faith isn't about the absence of fear. It's about trusting God enough to move forward anyway. 3. God's power is perfect in weakness. The reduction of Gideon's army highlights a profound truth. God's strength is made perfect in our weakness. 2 Corinthians 12 verse 9. When we rely on him, he can accomplish far more than we ever could on our own. 4. God meets us in our doubt. Gideon's repeated requests for signs show that God is patient with our doubts. He doesn't demand perfect faith. He works with what we have and helps it grow. 7. Applying Gideon's lessons to your life. Step out of hiding, like Gideon in the wine press. Many of us hide from our calling because of fear or insecurity. But God is calling you to step out and trust him. What wine press are you hiding in today? Is it fear of failure? Fear of rejection? Let Gideon's story remind you that God's presence is your greatest strength. Trust God's vision for your life. God's plans for you are far greater than what you can see. Trust his vision, even when it feels beyond your reach. Remember Jeremiah 29 verse 11. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future." Lean on God's strength. When you feel overwhelmed by your weaknesses, remember that God's power is sufficient. Pray for his guidance and strength, and take one step at a time. 8. Your mighty warrior moment. Gideon's story is a powerful reminder that God specializes in using the unlikely and the ordinary for his extraordinary purposes. He takes our doubts, fears, and weaknesses and transforms them into strength, courage, and victory. Whatever challenge you're facing today, know this: God sees you not as you are, but as you can be through his power. He calls you a mighty warrior, not because of your own strength, but because he is with you. So step out in faith. Trust God's vision over your self-doubt. Like Gideon, you may feel unqualified, but God's presence makes all the difference. And as you obey his call, you'll discover that his strength truly is made perfect in your weakness. Your victory is already written. Now it's time to take the first step. Will you trust him? Will you say yes? Because in God's hands, even the most hesitant heart can become a mighty warrior.